This is an extract from the Leader Coronavirus Daily podcast by the Evening Standard and hosted by me, David Marsland. To hear the whole thing, search for it on your podcast provider. With universities returning, joining the school pupils already back at classes and the increasing numbers of those going to the office, the UK's track and trace system is under strain and some fear it's starting to show. One expert told The Standard if students are going back, pubs should be closed to help contain the virus. It's another dangerous moment in the country's battle against COVID-19. A lot is uncertain, but our editorial column believes there are signs we'll get through it.
It's easy to put together a list of the things which are going wrong. People have to battle online to book a COVID test, and when you get into the system, it seems to have gone haywire. Infections are on the rise. Unemployment is shooting up too. When the reckoning comes, all this and more will be held against the government. But it is fair to recognise two other things. The first is that however bad things are now, we are in a much better place than we were in April. The second is that getting through COVID is hard everywhere. Even testing, a horror show right now if you have a sick child off school but can't get a result to let you return to work, is partly a victim of its own success. More than 200,000 tests a day are being carried out. We need more, but that is still a lot more than most countries are managing. It's right to be angry when ministers promise things which turn out not to be true and deny the difficulties. But as a country, we are pulling through this. Things will get better.
Our Deputy Political Editor Nicholas Cecil is with me. Nicholas, track and trace is definitely bending. Will it break?
Well, it's likely to come under ever-increasing pressure as we approach the winter. And there could be a significant rise when universities go back. The students are starting to go back this week. And universities are taking lots of steps to try and limit the spread of COVID and respond swiftly to any outbreak. But there's inevitably going to be a problem. If the test and trace system is not working, then they will find it quite hard to identify where outbreaks are developing.
Now, the test and trace system, according to an expert we've spoken to from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, it needs 70 to 80% coverage to work. It's not getting that, is it?
No, these experts, a group of academics, previously estimated that it was only achieving about a 50% of contacts being traced and spoken to. And on this, the government haven't been honest about the scale and the success of test and trace, which I think is one of the problems, because there's a trust problem now developing that people don't really believe the government numbers on the number of tests being carried out. And if you don't believe that, why should you go and follow the government advice and self-isolate when you're asked to do so?
But isn't part of the problem that places like schools have gone back, and then the common cold, the harmless cold, is causing chaos in some of these places because they're having to close down or pupils are having to stay home and they can't reopen until someone's got a test?
Yes, well, this is where adults, parents are acting responsibly. If their child gets a high temperature, you're supposed to self-isolate and get tested. But as we approach the winter months, there could be more and more cases of this. So they'll have to escalate the test and trace system, grow it far bigger to be able to cope with the numbers. And what one criticism is that the government should have acted earlier. So when autumn and winter approaches, the number of tests will be available that are needed.
And the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock's been talking about this lunchtime as well, hasn't he?
Labour got an urgent question in the House of Commons today, and he faced a lot of difficult questions from Tory, Labour and other MPs. And a few things emerged. One is that more than 100,000 tests a day are now being prioritised for the social care sector, which gives a very interesting insight into the scale of the potential problem in care homes, which the government obviously very, very keen to avoid a repeat of the dreadful scenes that we saw in the spring. There was also an interesting exchange between Jeremy Hunt, who's the Conservative chairman of the Commons Health Committee. He reminded the Health Secretary that last week the Health Secretary had said that he expected to have the problems in test and trace solved in 2 weeks. So he asked Mr Hancock, will that be solved next week? And The health secretary said we'll have the problem solved in weeks, basically. So it's certainly not going to happen next week, and maybe several weeks more before this problem is solved.
Search for the Leader Coronavirus Daily on any podcast provider to hear more from the podcast.